Well, hello everyone, Graham here from therecordingrevolution.com, and welcome back to a brief little mini-series I'm doing on mastering with stock plugins. Last video we looked at using EQ and how an EQ is probably the most helpful and important tool in the mastering phase for sculpting your sound, maybe helping out a mix that you didn't have a chance to work on. If you're just mastering it, being able to tweak the balance a bit for your own tastes, or if you're mixing across an album, you're mastering all those tracks and they're a little out of balance with each other, you can use an EQ to bring those tracks closer together so the whole album or EP is a little bit more uniform. The next tool I want to show you that I think is so helpful, and pretty much almost any DAW is going to have this, is compression. And we're going to look at two different types of compressors today. I'm going to look at a standard compressor and we're going to look at a multiband compressor and how helpful these tools can be in the mastering phase. So here's our song we were working on last time. And we did a little bit of EQ work, and that was about it. So now I've gotten the balance to be a little bit closer to what I hear in my head. His vocals needed brightening. The snare drum wasn't quite fat enough. There's a little bit of a ring and a muffled kind of sound that I took out a bit. So now I want to increase sort of the punch and the impact of the mix. And you can do that with a simple compressor. So I'm going to grab the compressor here in Studio One. And this is your standard compressor with all the typical knobs you'd expect. Even if you're not familiar with Studio One, you've got a ratio, you have a threshold, you have input gain, you have attack release, and then you have makeup gain. And so what I want to do is, since I like to mix, if I'm mixing a project through some mix bus compression, just a little bit of compression on the whole mix, usually on the master fader, to sort of squeeze the transients together a little bit more and get a little bit more punch out of the mix. I don't know if there was mix bus compression on this track. It was sent to me as is, but I'm going to kind of emulate that a little bit here. So I like the standard 2-to-1 ratio. I think that's fine. So what I'm going to do is maybe slow down the attack a bit more, a little bit slower attack. I don't want to close all the transients. And then I'm going to dial down the threshold until I'm seeing 1 or 2 dB of gain reduction on some of the peaks. Let's take a listen.
Con mi guitarra quiero tocar en esta noche y soltar el ritmo hasta que explote y así sentir tu alma y mi alma brillar. Ay, ay. Con mi guitarra quiero tocar en esta noche y soltar el ritmo hasta que explote y así sentir tu alma y mi alma brillar. Bye, 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 bye. Oh, 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 ah. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Oh, 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 ah. Bye, 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 bye. Oh.
Yeah, so when it's really pumping in the hook, you're looking at about 1.8 dB of gain reduction on the big snare drum and kick drum hits. So I've got just a little bit of compression happening, right? So it's just turning down those peaks just a little bit. The great thing about a compressor is it's not turning down everything else. So it's only squeezing those peaks a little bit. And then what I'm going to do is use the gain knob here to make up the gain, because we are in fact turning it down a little bit. I'm going to turn the whole mix up a little bit by about 1 dB. Okay, so we've turned down the peaks a little bit by 1.8, and that gives me some room to bring up the rest of the mix to match sort of those peaks. All right, let's take a listen.
Oh, 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 ah. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Oh, 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 ah. Bye, 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 bye. Oh, 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 ah. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Oh, 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 ah. Dicen lo que dicen y cuando todo lo que dicen empieza a ser perjudicial para todo gozar, déjalo si tu mente limpia.
Right, it brings a little bit more energy and punch to the mix. It brings out more gain underneath the peaks, so it keeps the peaks in line. It's not turning up everything, but it's just bringing up the whole mix together. So just a little bit of compression can go a long way. Now, another thing you can do is use something called multiband compression, which is just a compressor tied to a certain EQ frequency to do some cool sculpting. So for instance, I really think that I could use a little bit more bottom end on this mix. So I'm going to go in and grab the Multiband Dynamics plugin. Now, not every DAW might have a multiband compressor, but it's becoming more and more common. So this is maybe a stretch of a stock plugin for some of your DAWs. It's not necessary, but it's a great tool to have if you have one. So, and since Studio One comes with one stock, I'm going to just use this today. What you've got is, it looks like an EQ left to right. You got the 20 hertz all the way up to 10 kilohertz. And then in between these lines is basically a different compressor. You just basically can compress just the low end if you want, or just compress the top end or a mid-range. So I'm going to solo one band here, and I'm going to just listen to what that low end band up to this orange line sounds like. It's looking like it's up to 80 hertz. Right, so when you listen just to that low band up to 130, you're hearing the kick drum and the bass guitar. And so what I want to do is use a compressor just on what you just heard. I want to compress that. So I'm going to turn down the peaks a little bit, so it's a little bit more even, a little less, up and down in terms of bass response. And then we can use the similar concept of makeup gain to turn up the low end without affecting anything above that in the frequency spectrum. Pretty cool. So let's use the knobs over here. It's got a 2-to-1 ratio, and you've got the threshold. So I'm just going to, this doesn't have a ton of readouts, but I'm going to try to watch the gain reduction here and see if it's just doing, minus 3 dB or so. So just about halfway down here is about most of the gain reduction I want to see. So you're hearing a little bit more smack already, and then I'm just going to take up a little bit of gain, just 1 dB. All right, so it's going to boost the bottom end by 1 since we've turned it down by up to minus 3, maybe minus 6 on some of the hits. Just listen to the low end, you can hear that we're creating more impact and punch just on the bottom end. So let's unsolo this and listen to what we've done on the whole mix with just the multiband compression. Back up here. Right, so you feel more bass. It's a subtle thing, but more bass added to the mix without turning up an EQ or boosting way down there. You don't have to mess too much with it. You're just using compression to turn up the bottom end. And if you thought that turned up the whole mix a little too much overall, you can just use a main output gain here and turn that down a smidge. So like I might turn that down minus 0.5 so that I'm not turning up everything too much. So now we've done just a little bit of standard compression and a little bit of multiband compression. And so what I want to do is sort of show you where we've come with just the compression, and then show you where we've come with EQ and compression so far in the mix. So I'm going to turn the compressor and the multiband dynamics off and then back on, and we'll listen for the difference. Right, just a little bit more punch, a little bit more bottom end. So now I'm going to go ahead and kick off all three, the EQ that we did, and the compression, and the multiband dynamics. So you can hear the raw mix, and then so far what we've done in the mastering phase. Bye, bye, bye. Oh, 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 ah. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Oh, 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 ah. Bye, 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 bye. Oh, 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 oh.
perjudicial. Para todo gozar, déjalo, si tu mente libre va, libre va. Dicen lo que dicen y cuando todo lo que dicen empieza a ser perjudicial. Para todo gozar, déjalos, si tu mente libre va, libre va.
Right? Subtle things add up to a nice improvement. So there you are, some compression thoughts for mastering with stock plugins. All we've done is EQ and compression so far. Next week, we'll round it out with a couple other thoughts on what you can do with stock plugins in the mastering phase. Thanks for tuning in. Again, this is Graham at therecordingrevolution.com. Drop me a comment on the blog. Let me know your thoughts. We'll see you on the next video.